Hey guys, as I don't want to say promised you, not that you guys have been sitting on the edge of your seat waiting for these videos, but got some time on my hands and been meaning to do some beer videos since it's kind of a pastime of mine over the last few years and 20-something years of home brewing, on and off, of course. So I decided I'm going to just kind of do a few videos. Today's probably the longest video, maybe 10, 15 minutes. I try to keep it to that. Some days I'm going to just talk about just normal beer stuff. Sometimes I'm going to talk about specific beers, maybe do some beer reviews. Some of you are not aware, prior to everything that was going on with me, I was studying to be a certified Cicerone. It's kind of a sommelier for beer. Passed the written test, 94, did phenomenally well. Prepping for all my tasting section, and then the rails fell off on things, so I haven't been able to take the practical test yet, but I think I'm ready for it. I just have to fine tune a few things. But in the meantime, while I got some time, I just want to go over some stuff. Today I plan on talking about IPAs. That seems to be the big trend that everyone loves, different IPAs, and there's a lot of different IPAs, and I'll go through a few of them. Future video I plan on doing, I still have one of my West Vleteren Trappist beers in the refrigerator, so I really want to go into Trappist beers on another video, and sometimes I'm just going to do some beer reviews, okay? I have some time, and I may post them to YouTube just for format purposes, and that's it. So today, I got two beers from Montauk Brewing Company out here on Long Island. One is Eastern Haze IPA, and one is Wave Chaser IPA. And there's some differences in them, and I'm going to go into that right now, or at least start talking about it. IPA in general, as I've just mentioned, is India Pale Ale. Now, back in the 1700s, this guy George Hodgins, depending on what you read, the history, and that's the thing with beer history too, it kind of goes down this crazy path. Sometimes it turns, and sometimes people omit certain information. But the common agreement is George Hodgins, he was at the Bow Brewery outside of London, and he was making bitters. Now, English bitters are like pale ales in the United States, and I'll show the connection here in a bit. But English bitters, there's an ordinary bitter, a best bitter, and a strong bitter, and it varies depending on the mainly the alcohol ABV percentage that you have. And he was brewing a lot of bitters, and he was shipping it over to India, and it's about a 6-month trip over there. And they were finding that by the time the beer was getting over to India, many times for the soldiers that were over there, they were finding that it was spoiling. But they discovered that as they added more hops to the bitters and highly hopped the beer, it could be preserved, as well as sometimes the alcoholic strength at the time can make it to India preserved, and of course the beer would be a lot more enjoyable. So George Hodgins didn't invent IPA. There's a lot of rumor that he invented IPA. Now he was brewing mild bitters outside of London, and he just kind of tweaked, I guess, the recipe a little bit. The East India Trading Company that was shipping everything, not just beer, they were, shipping, stout, porters, goods, everything. They kind of connected with Burton-on-Trent in England, about 100 miles away from London. And they were finding that when they kind of, I don't want to say purchased the Bow Brewery and George Hodgins' recipe, but they kind of perfected the India Pale Ale because they founded, beers with higher sulfate in them kind of makes the hops jump a little bit. And even today in home brewing and microbreweries, they will put in gypsum, which is calcium sulfate, to change the sharpness of some of the hops, as well as calcium chloride for other beers, okay? So I'm not going to go into that all today. So they called it India Pale Ale because they were eventually, and this was in the early 1800s, the name actually came to India Pale Ale at that point. So he didn't name it, it just kind of morphed into it based upon preserving the beer. So, fast forward years later in the United States, I'm not going to go through the temperance movement and prohibition and everything, but if you fast forward to the late 1970s when home brewing became legal thanks to Jimmy Carter and at least signing the bill, I'm sure it wasn't him by himself, a lot of the home brewers in the United States what textbooks were they using to brew beer? Old English textbooks. Okay, so some of the early, beers and India Pale Ale or just Pale Ale in general kind of caught on. Now, actually, and this is probably going to be for another video, Sierra Nevada makes a Pale Ale. It's a very famous Pale Ale. And that was probably one of the first, them and Anchor made Liberty Ale, one of the first Pale Ales in the United States. So, of course, IPA became very popular. Now, if you go to the store, there's a lot of different IPAs. Or if you go to your local microbrewery, which I always encourage, buying your beer from your local microbrewery, there's India Pale Ale, which I've been talking a lot about. There's regular Pale Ale, which is a little lower in alcoholic strength. There's kind of a pyramid from Pale Ale to IPA, which is about 5.5 to 7.5% alcohol, to double IPA. Now we got guys making triple and whatever IPA. And a lot of times it's just the alcoholic strength to it. So these home brewers started making these beers and pale ales. And again, the IPA has kind of morphed a little bit. There's a white IPA, which if you're familiar with wit beer that has coriander in it and orange peel, it's kind of a take on that. There's black IPA. Rich Flynn, if you're watching this, Richesfield Brewery locally makes the only place I know locally that makes a black IPA. It kind of looks like a stout or porter. It doesn't have the coffee, espresso, and roast, but it's an IPA. And then the popular ones recently, have been the New England IPA, which I have an example here. And there's also West Coast IPA. Now, West Coast IPA uses a lot of Pacific Northwest hops like Cascade, Centennial, Columbus, has a lot of citrus, grapefruit type of smell and aroma. The malt profile on those look a little darker. Sometimes they use a little crystal malt. So when you see those, they may have a little more of a toast kind of malt profile, sometimes a wheat bread type of, and biscuity type of flavor. It's usually perfectly clear. And those were the IPAs, the West Coast IPAs, when I was kind of getting into craft beer in the early 90s after my West Virginia days, okay? But West Coast IPA was really popular, but it didn't grab on. And then as time went on, there was the American IPA, which I have an example here of more of the Montauk Brewing Company Wave Chaser. And they started using different types of hops, New World hops, that would give you more of like tropical fruit or mango or stone fruit like peach. And every hop varietal out there that you may read about, and if you're looking at the side of your cans, will give different types of hop flavor aroma. Now, again, I'm trying to keep this video somewhat short. Hops are used mainly for bitterness to counter the sweetness from the malt that you'll get. They're used for flavor and, of course, aroma. And each of these pale ales and IPAs that I'm talking about will swing the pendulum one direction or the other. So the West Coast IPA would have more piney, resiny, have a little citrus, like I said, with the grapefruit kind of, and resiny kind of think of like marijuana smelling type of things with the hops. And then, of course, balance with that. I said the American IPA sometimes gets more floral, fruity, and kind of contrasts. Those of you who have been drinking Budweiser or Heineken or anything over the years, sometimes, or some German Pilsners, those hops sometimes are a little bit more floral, perfumey, spicy, minty type of earthy. English hops, if you've grabbed English hops, they'll be more earthy, woodsy. And that's just trial and error, grabbing the beer, understanding what you're drinking, smelling the beer, and you're noticing the differences in the two. So those English bitters I talked about, Hodgins, and he's using things like East Kent Goldings or Fuggles hops, you're going to get a little bit more earthy, woody type of hops, okay, or smell or aroma, I should say, and the flavor to it. So as I said, the hops are for bitterness to balance off the sweetness, flavor, and aroma. Now things have changed. The first beer I want to talk about here is actually we're going right into the New England IPA because that's the most popular recently in the last 10 years. It's not my most favorite IPA, but because it's been very popular, it's selling, it's not going away anywhere. That's the one that sometimes you'll see the term hazy IPA or New England IPA or East Coast IPA. And the forefathers of that was a brewery called The Alchemist that brewed a beer called Heady Topper. Nowadays, most people don't even consider that a New England IPA anymore, but if you've heard of those beers, and those are the ones that look very cloudy, they're usually like 6 to 9% alcohol, hazy. It almost looks like someone dumped flour into them. And the reason why they're so hazy, and I'm going to pop this open as I'm talking to you, is that they a lot of times will use unmalted wheat, sometimes oats, okay, to add, and even the hops have what they call polyphenols that make it a hazy. And sometimes when you pour the beer, sometimes you'll actually see a precipitate from the hops that are from there. And actually, Heady Topper was notorious for that. And I won't go into the history why I tell you why he wants to drink it from the can. But if you pour it into the glass, sometimes you'll get actually hop particles because they'll dry hop it. Dry hopping is when the beer's almost done. They'll throw hops in for 3 to 5 days before packaging, and it'll add a lot more hop aroma. And as I said before, with the bitterness, they'll put the hops in the beginning of a boil for the hops to extract the bitterness and the alpha acids that give you that little bite of bitterness. If the hops are added a little bit later, like the last 15, 20 minutes of the boil, you get a lot more flavor from the hop. And then if you put it at the very end, you get a lot of the aroma, a lot more aroma from the hop. Now, you'll always get a little bit of both no matter where you put it in, but the ones that do the New England IPAs, it's heavily hopped late, okay, either late in the boil and dry hopped, and that's why you'll get a lot of the aroma. If you did it too early on, it burns off a lot of those oils and acids, so you don't get as much of the aroma with it. Okay, so that's just a little bit about those New England IPAs, hazy IPAs that you see. Also with that, while I'm thinking about it, is that you'll get less bitterness. Okay, so when you take a sip, you won't get that bitterness. Now, there's a difference between bitterness and acidity. Okay, so if you put the beer on your tongue, a lot of times if you ever had a Berliner Weiss or sours are very popular, that bitterness will hit your taste buds very quick. I should say the acidity hits your taste buds very quick. The bitterness, let it sit on your tongue, let it just kind of swallow it and just wait a few seconds and you'll catch the bitterness on the back end, okay? So the New England IPAs won't give you much bitterness like the West Coast IPA and sometimes the American IPA, but it will be very powerful in the hop aroma. That's why a lot of times people prefer that because they'll get that citrusy, like grapefruit type of hit, orange juice, depending on the hop varietal. And then they will miss that bitterness. Bitterness gets a bad rap because when I was probably late high school, college student, Keystone, those bitter beer commercials, everyone thinks bitterness is bad, but the bitterness is very good for a lot of balancing some of the sweetness from beer. If beer is too cloying or too sweet, sometimes it's just overwhelming. And again, today's video is not to get into barley wines and all these other type of beers. I can do that for another day if I want to have some fun. But it's something to try if you're trying different beers. So I have this Eastern IPA. I'm going to pour it into my glass. Now, let me just talk quickly about glasses. If you ever see me post, I usually, this is why my friends there at Merchesfield Brewing Company. It became one of my favorite glasses. It's kind of a tulip glass. Got this one from my friend Bob, who sent me West Vletterland from Belgium, as well as Mark Sedem, who sent me, I got a chalice that I'll probably do my Trappist video on. But something that has kind of a little stem to it, opening, because you'll really be able to get your nose in there and smell the hops. As much as I love my Leslie Brewing Company pint glasses, the shaker pint is not the best glass for beer unless you're drinking probably American lager. So let me pour this, okay, because I've been talking about it here for a bit. And I'm just going to pour about a third here. Okay, so you'll see this being, and the lighting may not be perfect in here, and I'm going to pour another one later, but you'll see how yellow this is, cloudy. It's a little darker on my camera view right now. So this is a New England IPA or hazy or juicy IPA. And depending again on what type of hops they're using in the malt, you'll get a little bias towards mango or grapefruit. This one I've had before, so I know it's going to give me a little bit of grapefruit on the nose. but that's why they'll call it juicier fruit. It almost mimics fruit juice. And you know, some people tongue in cheek will make fun of this style of beer because it's like drinking juice, and that can be pleasurable for people. And you know, and no matter what my opinion is, whatever you enjoy drinking, drink it. Okay, so you will see. So what you really want to do, and why you don't want to fill up the whole glass, is you just kind of want to, you know, get your nose in there and smell. Now I know this one, I've had this before. It kind of gives you kind of a grapefruit, citrusy type of smell. It's not overwhelming. You can see it's kind of a cloudy, you know, kind of a darker straw, pale gold color. And hopefully you can see there. I'm going to move it over here. Okay. So again, this is a hazy New England IPA. Now, after you get a nice aroma from it, the head isn't really that persistent in this. Usually you want to kind of see a little more persistence in the white head, but at least the head's white, cloudy straw color, like I said, light gold. Then we'll just take a sip. You know, kind of let it coat your tongue. Now, when I get that, I get the similar thing that I get in the aroma. You know, one, there's not that much bitterness because it is a New England IPA. You know, you get that a little bit of peach, a little mandarin, maybe, you know, mandarin orange peel, but it's real heavy on the grapefruit, and maybe the grapefruit pith kind of gives you a little bit there. But again, not much bitterness at all with this beer, even though it is an IPA. Now this one is roughly, like I said, IPAs are usually anywhere from, you know, 6 to, well, I should say, New England IPAs are usually anywhere from like 6 to 9% alcohol. American IPAs are usually about 5.5 to 7.5. Double IPAs about 7.5 to 10% alcohol. So some of these beers, not this one in particular, you want to be very careful when you're consuming. You will also see at places, again, I'm getting ahead of myself, but the higher the alcohol, don't be annoyed if they serve you in a smaller glass. Okay, you have something that's 10, 12% alcohol. Some of these double IPAs, they're going to probably put you in a snifter or a smaller tulip glass like this, just for responsible serving. Now, you know, also what you'll get with some of this is the kind of the mouthfeel. You know, a lot of these are kind of medium bodied, you know, because sometimes they are used. I don't know specifically what Montauk does, if they do use unmalted wheat, just the hops, or if they're using oats, but you'll get a little bit more higher mouthfeel with that. If you ever had an oatmeal stout, right, they use oats, it kind of gives that full mouthfeel. This one's actually pretty light bodied for the style. Which is good. It's very easy drinking. This one, I believe, is roughly, you know, 6% alcohol or so. You know, and take it in. You know, we feel for the carbonation. You know, this is kind of lightly to moderately carbonated. I said the bitterness is low, on the low end. Got a lot of hop aroma. And that's pretty much it, but it's pretty nice beer. Now, the other one I'm going to open up before I end the video, okay, is just a regular American IPA. Now, this one is, you know, nowadays what happens is a lot of these guys, because the New England IPAs are selling so quickly, they're producing. This is why when you go to some of your microbreweries, you'll look at the board and there'll be like 10 beers and 7 to 9 of them are IPA. Now this one is Montauk's version. It's a slightly darker. Okay, if you see that, bring it closer to the camera. Okay, you know this one is not as powerful with the hop aroma. Okay, it's giving me a little bit more mandarin and orange than grapefruit. Okay, and probably a little peach on there too, but not that, you know, not that strong. So again, but you can see how the head on that is a little bit denser, okay? So this is a little bit closer to more of an American IPA than the other one, which is closer to a New England IPA. So if you see these, and this one also, by the way, a little more dank. There's a hop, Simcoe hop that kind of gives a dank. You'll actually laugh because sometimes if you ever read, I know I've been posting some of my Untapped things that I'll say dank, or they'll actually almost have like a cat pee type of smell, and you're like, whoa, cat pee, I don't want to drink that. But it kind of gives you that dank, Simcoe hops is known for that. But it's actually quite smooth and enjoyable at times, even though you use the term cat pee. Okay, so see. Yeah, see, this one gives me a little more tropical fruit. It's almost like that little mango, a little bit more peach, stone fruit than the grapefruit from the India Pale Ale. Okay, so again, hopefully, I have fun doing this. I'm probably gonna be doing videos just reviewing beers. Like I said, I got a Trappist beer coming in. I'm gonna go on all about Trappist breweries in Belgium and things like that. But I have fun doing this. If you don't enjoy these, just scroll by or unfollow me. But hopefully a little history about IPA and just some beers in general. But I want to end this now because I see I'm pushing 20 minutes and I want to keep it there. All right. Have a great day, guys. Take care. Bye.